And welcome back to a special edition of Today on this Tuesday morning, the 17th of April, 2007, coming to you live from the campus of Virginia Tech, a campus that had its peace and tranquility shattered yesterday when a gunman opened fire here, killing 32 and then himself. It is the latest in a string of deadly school shootings across this country. NBC's Michael Oku has more on that.
On the morning after the deadliest shooting rampage in U.S. history, we are left in shock and heartbreak and asking what are now disturbingly familiar questions. How could this happen, and why? We all asked why in 1966 after an engineering student at the University of Texas climbed the clock tower, opened fire, and killed 16. Until now, an awful record. Why, in 1999, 8 years ago this week, two outcasts at Columbine High School killed 13. Since Columbine, there have been more than 150 fatal shootings in the nation's high schools and colleges. In 2002, for example, a graduate student dismissed from Virginia's Appalachian School of Law returned to kill a dean and a professor. Later that year, a failing student at University of Arizona Nursing School killed 3 of his instructors. The shooters were different ages. Only in retrospect did we see the red flags, signs of mental illness in some cases, vengeful anger in most.
Typically, these are not individuals who've had a history of violent and aggressive behavior in their earlier lives. So I think that's what makes it so both puzzling and terrifying, is that we don't know where this is coming from.
But after Monday's shooting, people are also asking why authorities didn't lock the campus down after the first 2 victims were shot in a dormitory. More than 2 hours passed before the university sent an email warning students, and before the gunman opened fire again in another building half a mile away.
The number one glitch we find in most emergency responses evolves around communications. The question in Virginia Tech is going to evolve around whether or not there was evidence of an ongoing threat.
Security experts also questioning the police's response. Did law enforcement try to immediately take the gunman out?
That is the lesson of Columbine, and the lesson is this: for every second you waste, another innocent person is killed.
The experts agree that today's schools are more vigilant, more mindful of warning signs, but concede it's difficult to stop a lone gunman willing to die.
This type of incident will most likely happen again.
And no doubt we'll ask why. Perhaps as much out of sheer outrage, collective grief, as for the answers themselves. Answers most of us know we'll never understand. For today, Michael Oku, NBC News, Los Angeles.
Clint Van Zandt is a former FBI profiler, Jeanine Pirro, a former prosecutor, Dr. Keith Abloh is a psychiatrist, and Craig Scott survived the Columbine shootings 8 years ago. His sister Rachel died in that tragedy. Good morning to all of you.
Good morning.
Good morning, Matt.
And Clint, let me start with you. I mean, so many facts are coming out now about this shooter, except his identity, but we know that he was fairly heavily armed with a 9mm and perhaps a .22 caliber, lots of ammunition, had drilled or scraped the serial numbers off the gun, carried chains to lock the doors. What jumps out at you?
Well, first of all, it's the premeditation. I mean, this guy didn't just wake up yesterday morning and decide to do this, Matt. He had acquired 2 different weapons. He had acquired ammunition. We're told he had multiple magazines to carry the rounds in. He had a vest that he could put these in. He had filed the serial numbers off one, if not both weapons. He didn't carry any identification with him.
Which, by the way, the serial number is a bit absurd to me. If this guy actually thought that this would end the way it did, with him taking his own life or being killed by authorities, what does it matter to him that the serial number's on the gun?
And that's a good question. We're trying to get in the mind of someone who was obviously unreasonable at this specific point, but know that he carried no identification with him, too. So it looks like, for whatever his reason, Matt, he was trying to deny authorities the ability to identify him.
And before I move on to Jeanine, also the fact that he took 2 lives at 7:15, and then whatever he was doing for 2 hours, he waited 2 hours to claim additional lives.
It was less than a half a mile from point A to point B from the 2 shooting sites, so that's what the authorities have to figure out. What was he doing during that time period? But as you say, he had the chains with him that he used to secure the doors in that second building. So if you're carrying 2 guns, bullets, chains, all of these other things, you planned on doing something that day.
Janine, let me turn to you. The president of this university and officials here are going to answer some very tough questions and have already started about why these 2 hours passed before they sent out an email warning students. In terms of what you heard, were typical or common sense procedures followed here?
Well, you know, it's very difficult at this point, Matt, until we get all the facts. But I have to tell you, as a former prosecutor, judge, and as a mother as well, I am very concerned about whether or not this university even complied with the Clery Act, which mandates that universities have a policy of a timely notification of crisis situations. And I've gotten copies of Virginia Tech's crisis communication plan, and they make it very clear that there needs to be immediate notification to key constituencies. Now, the claim so far, Matt, is that, look, you know, we didn't think this was an ongoing problem. And we think the guy who shot 2 people at AJ was off campus. Well, you have to prove to me and everyone around that unless you actually saw him exit campus, you had every reason to believe he was on campus. And if
Right, what you're saying is you have to assume the worst case scenario, that you've got a deranged individual who's already taken 2 lives and has nothing to lose.
It has nothing to lose. And in addition to that, Matt, they actually closed classes on the first day of school because there was a shooting on the edge of campus. Now we've got someone who's killed 2 people already, has nothing to lose, and, you know, is chaining doors so that our students can't get out of the university. Where are the security cameras? They can bring in mutual assistance, federal, state, law enforcement, bring in the National Guard. There's too much at stake here. And my concern is that they didn't have the timely notification and that the students here might not have been killed had there been more immediate attention to this.
And Dr. Keith Ablow, clearly you try and get in the mind of the person who committed this heinous act, but also you have to worry about the emotional state of the students who've witnessed this.
Absolutely. There are no unsolvable behaviors in the human condition. There are unsolved mysteries of why people do what they do. But I can tell you, it didn't start with being a jilted lover. It had to start much earlier in this man's life history, where he had extreme sensitivity to loss, for instance, or extreme hostility in his family of origin. There's always a story. And yes, you know what? More is better for these young people on the campus. The more they can talk about what they've lived through, the more that they can be encouraged to emote, that gives them some security and insulation against burying those feelings and then having them surprise them later in life. That's the metaphor here. This young man didn't have the opportunity to express himself.
And Craig Scott, I can only imagine, as someone who survived the Columbine tragedy and also lost a sister in that tragedy, first on a personal level, how the news of this incident struck you.
I was very sad for the people in Virginia when I first heard the news, and I knew that yesterday would be a day that they would forever remember, and that their lives would never really be the same going forward if they lost a loved one or if they were injured. And I know that I've not been the same and really have thought about Columbine since it happened, and I just know about some of the things that they're going to be going through, and I'm praying for them. And I know that there's a lot of hurt, there's a lot of questions and a lot of anger. And my focus is since Columbine has been to try to do something to help stop violence in schools.
And I know you've spoken out extensively on that. Craig, what helped you in the days following Columbine? What do the students here need to hear to at least begin the healing process?
I think one of the amazing things that can happen after a tragedy is people can really put their small differences aside and people can come together. And I hope that happens with families, with friends, and with the people of this community, to really be there for the families, even if it's in small ways, to help serve meals, not just in this next week, but for months to come. And I think to remember their loved ones, and I think I've gotten a lot of healing from sharing the story of who my sister was to people. And she was a very compassionate, kind person, and I believe as far as the schools are concerned, that kindness and compassion can be a big antidote to the anger and hatred and violence that's happening. And so I do a lot of traveling and speaking in schools, and I meet a lot of students that are depressed, that are angry, and share a story that really grips their hearts, and then challenge them to think about how they treat one another. I don't know about this shooter, but I know about some of the things that the youth are going through today.
Craig Scott, thank you for your thoughts on this. Our thoughts are with you on this day. Also, Janine Pirro, Dr. Keith Abloh, and Clint Van Zandt, thank you as well. Good to have you here.
Thank you.